welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor. I hope you can hear me well. Maybe first, 2 words for those of you who don't know BEUC. BEUC is an umbrella organization that represents national consumer organizations in Brussels towards the EU institutions. We have currently 46 members from 32 countries, and ZPS is one of our members, of course. So I'm very happy to attend this event. Thank you very much for the invitation. In the first part of the presentation, we wanted to first speak about greenwashing as a phenomenon in general. We've been talking a lot about food today, but greenwashing, of course, is a much wider problem. If we can move to the next slide, you will see just a couple of examples. And of course, I think maybe there is some, it needs a bit of time to switch the slides, but I will continue nevertheless. So the greenwashing is definitely a big problem now. Misleading claims are more and more present on the market among different types of products, not only food, as I said. It's often the highly polluting products, like the ones that are based on fossil fuels, for example. And this is really a pity, because the potential that we have now with consumers being more and more concerned about the environment and the threat of the climate crisis, and making the efforts to lead a more environmentally friendly lifestyle and to choose more environmentally friendly products, those efforts are a bit in vain, because it's really difficult for them now to identify which products are the ones which are generally environmentally friendly. And so, yeah, if we move to the next slide. And why we need now an urgent change in the rules that tackle this problem. Well, as I mentioned, consumers are now concerned and really want to choose greener products, but this is being made difficult for them. It's like 61%, according to EU studies, do not understand which products are truly environmentally friendly, and as high as 45%. Consumers admit that they don't trust environmental claims. And to be honest, from our experience, they're right. There has been recently, in November in 2020, a CPC sweep. CPC is a network of consumer protection authorities across the EU, and they conduct some systematic checks. And in 2020, they chose environmental claims as a topic of their sweep and the checks. And the result was that they have stated that in around 42% of cases, the authorities had reasons to believe that the claims used by the traders were misleading. And that's a huge percentage. That's almost half of the claims that are being used on the market. But that is just another proof that this is a real problem. And that we cannot afford to wait any longer to tackle it in an effective way. If we move to the next slide, you will see that the EU institutions have also recognized that this is an issue and announced that there will be some initiatives that are supposed to remedy this problem. The first announcement was in December 2019, when the Green Deal communication was published, which of course listed a lot of different initiatives also from other fields, but including also specific ideas on how to tackle greenwashing. That was then later confirmed also with other 2 documents of strategic importance, the Circular Economy Action Plan and the New Consumer Agenda. In those documents, it was confirmed that the issue of green claims will be tackled on the EU level by 2 legislative proposals. So one of them is the proposal on empowering consumers in the green transition, which has already been published in March this year. And the second one, we're still expecting in the second half of the year, and that will be a proposal for a regulation on substantiating green claims with the product environmental footprint method. If we move to the next slide. Here I wanted to tell you a bit about the proposal that is already on the table, so the one on empowering consumers in the green transition. Greenwashing is just one part of this proposal. The proposal introduces targeted amendments to 2 horizontal consumer directives, to the directive on unfair commercial practices and the one on consumer rights. It's only the Unfair Commercial Practices Directive that is relevant here in the context of the greenwashing practices. And what was actually included in the proposal, where first of all, the proposal wants to introduce a ban on a case-by-case basis of two different practices. So first, it would not be allowed to make an environmental claim related to future environmental performance. So stating, for example, we will be carbon neutral in 2050, without clear, objective, and verifiable commitments and targets, and without an independent monitoring system. The second practice that will be also banned on a case-by-case basis would be advertising benefits for consumers that are considered as a common practice in the relevant market. On the next slide, you will see that apart from those two practices, there will be also another 4 practices that are now being proposed to be banned, but in this case, in all circumstances. So those practices will be added to the so-called blacklist of unfair practices, which are included into the annex of the Unfair Commercial Practices Directive. And those 4 practices are displaying a sustainability label, which is not based on a certification scheme or not established by public authorities. That would be the first one, which would not be allowed anymore. And then making a generic environmental claim without being able to prove the excellent environmental performance. A generic environmental claim, in other words, a vague claim without specifying what the claim is really referring to. And then the 2 other practices would be to make an environmental claim about the entire product when actually it concerns only a certain aspect of that product, and presenting requirements imposed by law as a distinctive feature of the offer. If we move to the next slide, I wanted to talk to you a bit about BEUC's recommendations that we have developed ahead of those 2 proposals that have been announced. The proposal that we already have on the table, as I mentioned, it introduced targeted amendments to the Unfair Commercial Practices Directive. However, there are some important flaws of this approach, because this directive can only provide for an ex post control of claims, meaning that when the claims are already introduced on the market, they are there for a while, and then somebody comes forward and challenges the claim. Then the public authority or the court can take that on, can analyze that claim, check the evidence, and possibly ask to have that claim withdrawn from the market. So only an ex post control is possible. There are no rules on any systematic checks of the green claims that are being used on the market, and it often takes a very long time before the claim is actually removed from use, because as you know, the court proceedings, they can take years. So that is of course an issue, and it impacts our situation. Another problem is also a diverging interpretation on different provisions of the directive, and a different level of enforcement, which is dependent also a lot on the resources and the priorities of the national authorities, for instance. And since we see that really the urgency of the climate crisis is calling for much more ambitious measures that would effectively clean up the market and would not allow any misleading claims in the first place, we have developed a new set of recommendations, and we've been calling for a pre-approval procedure for all green claims and labels, which is inspired by a scheme that is already in place for health and nutrition claims in food. So if you work on food, you might know already this system. We have asked as well, like in the health and nutrition claims, for an EU level assessment of claims, and then for creating a public registry where the decisions about the pre-approval would be published and would have an erga-omnes effect, meaning that new traders that would like to use a similar claim would just need to check first whether it has been pre-approved before or not, and what were the conditions that need to be fulfilled so that the claim can be used. We have also asked to ban certain claims that are impossible to substantiate from the scientific point of view. One of the examples is the claim that is now very widely used, which is carbon neutral or CO2 neutral, climate neutral or its equivalents, which we think cannot be achieved in reality because the product can never be actually neutral to the climate. Other elements of our recommendations was to ask the traders to submit the evidence before the claim is used and not only when the claim is challenged at some point by the authority or by the court. We have asked for a more effective market surveillance, which is also key to remedy the situation, and for introducing a centralized accreditation scheme for green claims and labels. If we move to the next slide, you will see a little picture. But just to say that the goal of our recommendations is basically to make sure that no misleading claims enter the market in the first place, and to make sure that the green choice becomes an easy choice for consumers so that they know which products to buy and they can trust the claims that are being used. And now I would like to give the floor to my colleague Camille for the rest of our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrycja. Good morning to everyone, and apologies for the hiccup with the presentation at the start. I will now zoom in on a specific type of claim, and I have again the same problem that it's frozen. I cannot move the slide anymore. Yeah, so I will share my screen again. Sorry for that. So I will zoom in on a specific type of green claims, and that is environmental labels or scoring system for food. And perhaps you have already come across some of these labels in supermarkets. With consumers increasingly concerned about the sustainability of their food choices, a range of actors, including retailers or food companies, have started to develop their own sustainability or environmental labels for food. The one that you see here on the slide are just some examples. There are many more, in fact. And some of these labels provide a single score that is meant to represent the overall green performance of the product. Other labels break it down into several components that each represent a certain specific impact, whether biodiversity or climate, etc. But the problem is that this proliferation of labels risks creating a lot of confusion for consumers, especially when it's not always clear to them what this label cover and mean exactly. So we in fact welcome the fact that the EU will try and put a bit of order in the way these companies and retailers communicate on the environmental impact of the products. So concretely, what is in the EU policy pipeline when it comes to this type of label? So as part of the Farm to Fork strategy, which is the EU blueprint for sustainable food and farming, the European Commission has announced that it will develop a new sustainable food labeling framework. And this framework will be part of a broader initiative on sustainable food system that we expect by the end of 2023. And the Commission has said that this framework will cover the nutritional, climate, environmental, and social aspects of food products. So it's quite broad. It's not clear whether it would be a single logo, but it's rather expected that it would be different elements, each covering a certain dimension of sustainability. And the Commission has also said that this framework should be consistent with relevant EU policy initiatives. And when it comes to the climate and environmental component, this would mean the Green Claims initiative that Patrycja mentioned earlier. And we are concerned with this, and I will now tell you why. So it is expected that in the Green Claims initiative, the Commission will recommend that the PEF method, the Product Environmental Footprint method, will be the method recommended to measure and express the environmental impact of products and to substantiate green claims. And together with other civil society organizations, we have voiced concern about this when it comes to agri-food products, because we think that the PEF method is not well suited to agri-food products. The first reason is that the PEF method does not allow to compare products across different food categories. So for instance, you would not be able to compare milk and a soy-based drink, for instance. But more fundamentally, the problem with PEF is that it's mostly an indicator of yields. And as such, it tends to favor the most intensive method of production. And this is because the PEF method lacks robust indicators for several key environmental impacts, such as, for instance, land degradation, biodiversity losses, or pesticide use. And at the same time, it also fails to capture the positive externalities of organic or extensive farming systems, such as, for instance, the positive impact on soil health and biodiversity, etc. So we think that here we need to take a step back and in fact ask ourselves, okay, what signal do we want to send to consumers? Which products do we want to nudge them? And that should be, so to say, the guiding question to choose the most appropriate methods. And here we think that any environmental food label and the methodology behind it should aim at driving changes in diet and food production method, which are in line with the EU's objective for sustainable food and farming. And these are, for instance, reducing the use of pesticides, fertilizers, and antimicrobial in farming, but also increasing the share of organic food production, shifting to more plant-based diet. So these should be, let's say, the guiding principles for selecting the best methodology for an environmental food label. So from the consumer perspective, we have tried to develop some key principles that we think any meaningful environmental label for food should comply with. And first, when it comes to the development process, we think that such labels should be transparently developed based on solid scientific evidence free for commercial interest. And this is really key for the label to be trusted and seen as credible by consumers. Second, when it comes to the format of the label, it should be interpretive. We have no experience from the nutrition area, and we know that labels that work best with consumers are the ones that come with an interpretive element, such as color coding, and they are especially effective with consumers from lower socioeconomic groups. Third, regarding the use of the label, as I said earlier, it should allow comparing products within a category to distinguish between different production systems and production methods, but it should also allow comparing products across food categories. And this is really important to drive consumers towards more plant-based diets. For instance, consumers should be able to compare, say, a beef steak and pulses. And that would not be possible with the PEF method, as I said earlier. And finally, it's also important that such label be accessible to all types of businesses, big and small. And that means that we need to strike the right balance between the robustness and level of accuracy of the assessment and the data that is being used for calculating the environmental impact, and then the need to keep the system as simple as possible so that it's really accessible to all types of businesses, including small producers. What's the point if all products go the same? So with this slide, I've tried to illustrate the need for the label to sufficiently discriminate between products, so between products across categories, but also within categories. And this is really important to steer consumers towards more sustainable production methods. These products are just examples from which you can find in Belgium. Because in Belgium, some retailers have started using the Eco Score, so it's on their private label products. The Eco Score is a label that appeared on the French market, and it's based mostly on the PEF method, to which it adds some complementary indicators, for instance, such as the origin of the product, the packaging, etc. And while the intention is good initially, real-life examples, as you see on the slide, show that these corrections are not sufficient to discriminate between products. Concretely here, you see some eggs, some are barn eggs, others are free range, others are organic, but they all score the same. They all get a B, an Eco Score B. So it's really not useful information for consumers because it cannot really give them any information or guide them towards the most sustainable production method and products. And finally, just to conclude, I wanted to say a few words about the role of the food environment, because we've been talking a lot about labels, about consumer information, but in fact, we know this is not enough. We often hear that the market delivers what consumers want to buy, but things are more complicated than that. It's a bit like the chicken and egg dilemma. It is, in fact, a bit unfair to expect consumers to change their food behavior just based on information when we know that at the same time the unsustainable choice is the most available, the most advertised, and also often the cheapest option. So it's really important that we work beyond labeling and that we try to improve the food environment, meaning all the factors that shape people's choices, including pricing, marketing and advertising, but also promotion. So these are really key drivers that guide consumer choices, and unless we also act at this level, then just information will not be enough. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much, and I will stop